Hello, students, teachers, parents, history nerds. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Nutshelled History, where we lay out the facts, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We continue with our Early America series by looking at the Reconstruction era. This is the full topic, so this one is longer than the individual lessons. Check the description down below for a fill-in-the-blanks worksheet that goes along with this video. I just ask that you like and subscribe. I apologize in advance for any mispronunciations. I do my best. All right, now let's go. Early Reconstruction. As the Civil War wrapped up, with the Union taking the win, no rematch scheduled, the nation found itself in a mess. The South was in ruins. Think charred buildings, shattered farms, and a whole lot of people wondering, what now? Nearly 4 million newly freed African Americans needed jobs, homes, and an education, while the North had its own set of political, social, and economic headaches, just on a smaller scale. To tackle this chaos, Congress rolled out the Freedmen's Bureau in March 1865, basically the 19th century version of disaster relief. It set up hospitals, provided emergency aid, and, most importantly, started schools to teach formerly enslaved people how to read and write. It even helped establish colleges for African Americans, proving that education really is power. Meanwhile, President Lincoln had a Reconstruction plan that we call the 10% plan because it required just 10% of a state's voters to pledge loyalty to the U.S. and agree to abolish slavery, kind of a let's move on approach. Congress, however, wanted a stricter deal, requiring a majority of voters to swear loyalty. But before any of these plans could get rolling, tragedy struck. Lincoln was assassinated on April 14, 1865, sending the country into shock. Enter Andrew Johnson, Lincoln's Democratic vice president from Tennessee, who found himself suddenly in charge. Johnson's Reconstruction plan was also on the lenient side. Just ratify the 13th Amendment, which officially banned slavery, and Southern states could rejoin the Union. While this was a huge step forward for African Americans, Johnson's generous pardons for former Confederates didn't sit well with many Northerners, especially Republicans in Congress. And just like that, the next political battle was brewing. Radical Reconstruction. During Reconstruction, Southern states took advantage of Johnson's low opinion of racial equality and came up with a sneaky way to keep African Americans from fully enjoying their newfound freedom: black codes. These laws basically screamed, "Nice try, but we're not letting you climb the social ladder just yet." They restricted employment opportunities, political rights, and ensured that freedmen remained a cheap labor force. Naturally, Republicans in Congress were furious, blaming President Johnson's soft approach for allowing these laws, and violent riots where white mobs attacked black communities and burned homes and schools to take root. Not ones to sit back and let injustice slide, the radical Republicans in Congress went full throttle. Their goal? Keep former Confederates from seizing power and guarantee freedmen the right to vote. To make it official, they passed the Civil Rights Act of 1866 and the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment did three big things. It made freedmen U.S. citizens, promised them equal protection of the laws, and told states they couldn't take away life, liberty, or property without due process. President Johnson wasn't a fan, but Congress ignored him, and by 1868, the amendment was ratified. Then came the 1866 elections, where the radical Republicans won big in Congress. They flexed their new power by passing the Reconstruction Act of 1867, which essentially told rebellious Southern states, play by our rules or else. The act wiped out state governments that refused to accept the 14th Amendment and put them under military control. By mid-1868, all those states had, begrudgingly, ratified the amendment, rewritten their constitutions, and allowed African Americans to vote. Johnson, still pouting about Congress overriding him at every turn, kept trying to fight Reconstruction policies. Congress had enough and moved to impeach him. At his trial, Johnson managed to keep his job by just one vote. Close call, but his days of influence were over. In the 1868 presidential election, Ulysses S. Grant took the win for the Republicans, thanks in part to 500,000 African American voters who helped him secure 6 Southern states, while many former Confederates were still benched from the polls. Despite Democratic resistance, because, of course, Congress passed the 15th Amendment in 1869. This one slammed the door shut on voter discrimination based on race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Translation? No more, you can't vote because you used to be enslaved. Nonsense. Reconstruction was far from over, but at least the foundation for a more equal America was set, whether the South liked it or not. Reconstruction and Southern society. During Reconstruction, Southern politics got a shakeup with three new groups stepping into the spotlight. First, there were the Scalawags, white Southern Republicans who just wanted to move on from the war and start rebuilding. Conservative Democrats gave them this less than flattering nickname because, well, grudges die hard. Then came the Carpetbaggers, Northerners who packed up, allegedly with bags made of carpet, and headed south. Some were eager to help freedmen build better lives, while others saw an opportunity to make a quick buck. And finally, for the first time in American history, freed African Americans took on major political roles, becoming sheriffs, judges, legislators, and even members of Congress. Hiram Revels and Blanche Bruce broke barriers as U.S. senators, proving that African Americans weren't just voters, they were leaders. But not everyone was thrilled about sharing power. Conservative whites, instead of handling their loss like adults, decided to go full villain mode. They formed groups like the Ku Klux Klan, a secret society dedicated to terrorizing African Americans and their allies. Congress tried to put a stop to it by passing laws against voter intimidation, but violence and threats still took a toll, and black voter turnout started to decline. Meanwhile, Republican-led governments in the South were busy making progress. They built public schools, expanded women's rights, and repaired war-torn infrastructure like roads, railroads, and telegraph lines. New state constitutions made voting and holding office more accessible, at least for a while. Over time, however, white leaders found sneaky ways to push African Americans out of the political process. On top of political struggles, the South's economy was a mess. Poverty was widespread, especially among freedmen, and many turned to sharecropping, a system that sounded like farming freedom but was really just debt disguised as opportunity. Landowners rented out land in exchange for a hefty portion of the crops, keeping sharecroppers trapped in an endless cycle of poverty. And to make matters worse, vagrancy laws criminalized unemployment, essentially forcing many African Americans into unpaid labor. Reconstruction had promised a fresh start, but for many freedmen, the reality looked a lot like the past, just with new rules. The aftermath of Reconstruction. By the 1870s, many Northerners had Reconstruction fatigue. They were tired of trying to fix the South and just wanted to move on. Meanwhile, Congress handed out amnesty to former Confederates like it was a get-out-of-jail-free card, which meant white Southerners quickly regained control of state and local governments. The Redeemers had gotten their way. Reconstruction officially bit the dust thanks to the Compromise of 1877, one of the shadiest political deals in American history. The presidential election of 1876 was a mess, with no clear winner and three states arguing over the results like kids fighting over the last cookie. To break the deadlock, Democrats agreed to let Republican Rutherford B. Hayes become president, as long as he promised to pull federal troops out of the South. Hayes took the deal, got the presidency, and wasted no time in yanking those troops faster than a magician pulling a tablecloth off a set dinner table. With no one left to enforce Reconstruction laws, white Southerners wasted no time rolling back black rights. They introduced poll taxes and literacy tests, which were less about knowledge and more about keeping freedmen away from the ballot box. Meanwhile, grandfather clauses conveniently exempted most white voters from these rules, ensuring that democracy in the South stayed as lopsided as ever. Then came Jim Crow laws, which locked segregation into place, enforcing racial separation in everything from schools to train cars to water fountains. How, you ask? What about the Equal Protection Clause in the 14th Amendment? Well, the Supreme Court ruled that separate is okay as long as it is equal in the 1896 case Plessy v. Ferguson. Yuck. Faced with this new wave of oppression, many African Americans packed their bags and headed north or west, looking for better opportunities. Economically, the South was slowly pulling itself out of the ruins. Cotton and tobacco were back in business, and new industries like textiles, timber, iron, and oil helped balance out the region's economy. By 1900, the South wasn't entirely dependent on King Cotton anymore. It had finally learned to diversify its portfolio. Too bad it took so long to figure out that a one-crop economy wasn't the best long-term investment. All right, here's the Reconstruction recap. Reconstruction was America's messy attempt at a post-Civil War do-over, and like most group projects, it had its fair share of drama. With the South in ruins and 4 million freed African Americans needing jobs, homes, and education, the government launched the Freedmen's Bureau to help out. Lincoln had a lenient plan to bring Southern states back into the Union, but after his assassination, his successor, Andrew Johnson, took over, and let's just say, he wasn't winning any popularity contests. His lax approach let Southern states pass black codes, basically oppression with a legal stamp. Radical Republicans weren't having it, so they passed the Civil Rights Act of 1866 and the 14th Amendment, guaranteeing citizenship and equal protection for African Americans. When Johnson kept resisting, Congress impeached him. He survived by 1 vote, and Ulysses S. Grant became president with major support from black voters. Reconstruction governments made big changes, like expanding public education and civil rights, but white supremacist groups like the KKK used violence to push African Americans out of politics. By the 1870s, Northerners had lost interest in reform, and the Compromise of 1877 officially ended Reconstruction, pulling federal troops out of the South. Without protection, African Americans faced voter suppression, Jim Crow laws, and segregation, thanks to the awful Plessy v. Ferguson ruling. Some left for the North and West, while the South slowly rebuilt its economy beyond just cotton. Reconstruction had promised equality, but when the dust settled, it was clear that America still had a long way to go. There you have it, folks. That is the Reconstruction era nutshelled. Thanks for stopping by Nutshelled History. Tap, tap, tap those like and subscribe buttons for me. Was Reconstruction a success or a failure? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. I'll see y'all next time on Nutshelled History.